Well, one end of our rail trail is up on the 800-foot floor, the flat floor of the Outwash Channel. And the other end descends into the cleft of the river basin. Now, if we are romantic, we might imagine that the trains that passed through the middle of this quarry actually stopped here and loaded up with sand here. And if they were headed to a foundry in central Adrian at the riverside, which is where all the industry was, they had a downhill ride. My first time down the rail trail, I was very distracted and charmed, actually, by the original railroad bridges, or we should say trestles. There are trestles across each of the 4 streams that the rail trail crosses, and then the huge train stations are preserved at Trestle Park in central Adrian. And another great beauty, not an Ice Age artifact, but these huge rustling cottonwood trees, the flagship tree of the whole spillway. A really fun thing that we come to early on the trail, near the Tecumseh trailhead, is an active quarry. We can hear the noise behind this thick foliage, and you wish you could see over the berm and the foliage.
I wish we could see that quarry.
Yeah.
And just look at that beautiful sand and gravel in this concrete. That's the sort of thing that we find in these quarries before the aggregate has been sifted out by size. Well, the Kiwanis Trail passes through beautiful farmland. Look at this sandy farmland. Well, it could be said that right here at Gady Road begins the erosion story, the story of the erosion of the River Raisin in the spillway between Tecumseh and Adrian. With this little cook drain as a leftover of when Lake Maumee completely inundated this spillway. The first meltwater lake in the Erie Basin was Lake Maumee. It banked against the high Fort Wayne moraine around the west and southwest side, and lapped up against the mile-high glacier of the Erie Lobe on the east-northeast, and grew and grew as that great ice lobe melted, and as tremendous quantities of meltwater came flowing off the highland, out of that interlobate, through our spillway, through Tecumseh, through Adrian, across Sand Creek, and down into this first new meltwater lake. And if we were there at that time, trying to ride the rail trail during that embayment, we might find that it was quite shallow, maybe only a couple feet deep, because this farmland here is just a couple feet below 800, and the lake stood at 800, except for these little shallow islands that are just barely above 800. And the rail trail threads right between these 2 little islands with Little Cook Drain at Gady Road. Now, at the time of highest Maumee, when this spillway was inundated like this, something fascinating and huge happened here during the formation of the Defiance Moraine that completely transformed this spillway. Now, this sketch leaves out the water, the embayment of Lake Maumee, but it does show the Defiance Moraine being formed under the margin of the ice, and something very interesting at the same time. There was such a flood of water coming out at that point from under the ice that the moraine wasn't laid there, or it was eroded away. And that's called a subglacial outburst torrent. The outburst torrent was probably much bigger and much stronger than what these images convey, because the water flowing through these dense glaciers is under tremendous pressure from far away up glacier, and causing these streams in places to be very forceful. Probably most of these gaps in the moraines were made by outburst torrents when the ice was still standing here.
Up. All right.
Now, Lake Maumee had 3 levels. It came in very high at 800 feet when the ice created the wall on the east side of the spillway. When the ice was gone, this gap made by the outburst torrent proved to be a much lower outlet than the original spillway outlet, probably 40 or 50 feet lower. After that very consequential outburst torrent, the main stem of the Raisin has been completely diverted. The Defiance Spillway is no longer a one-way outwash quarry. Now, as we roll on down the rail trail, our first little stream, Cook Drain, leaves us at Sutton Road. And look how the bottom of that glen points directly at that eroded gap.
It's real pretty in the fall, too.
Well, when I first saw that farm up there, I wondered, is that on a hill above us? Or are we in a scour channel going below grade? And yes, I learned that the trail has dropped about 22 feet by now. The farm is on the plane of the original spillway, the same level as those quarries that we left behind in the farmland. Now, for about a mile, the trail runs through a forest on a ledge above a ravine carved by Beaver Creek. And look at that hairpin turn that Beaver Creek has made. And just like Cook Drain, it too is pointing itself directly toward that gap in the moraine. Coming into Adrian now, we come to the big, long Wolf Creek trestle. And what a mess, or what an intricate ravine this is. We are in the cleft of the Raisin Basin. Actually, we're carried across that cleft on this long, long bridge. As we cross over this 30 or 40 feet above the flowing water.
All right.
Wolf Creek drops steeply out of the Fort Wayne moraine, and it's dammed right here on the west side of Bent Oak for Adrian's waterworks. And this is a major waypoint on the rail trail.
It's got 5 speeds and the battery's in here. It's got a rear electric hub motor.
Now, when trains were running on this rail, there was a mill pond and a mill race right here below the Bent Oak parking lot. Now, Wolf Creek and the South Branch of the Raisin meet here at their confluence, very nearby, just below this big, long trestle. And this is a good place to watch the various events in the big erosion story, the big Raisin erosion story that resulted in that fantastical river basin that we have here in the spillway.